Right now in South Korea, there is a rather peculiar debate brewing about something as fundamental as paying for meals. It is not just about the simple act of splitting the check, it delves into deeply ingrained expectations, unique cultural quirks, and astonishingly, a very specific understanding of romance and equality. Let us cut straight to the facts, no metaphors, no storytelling. The core of this whole discussion revolves around the attitude some Korean women seem to have towards Dutch pay, which for our international viewers is simply splitting the bill, a practice common in many parts of the world. According to various accounts and social media discussions, particularly highlighting comments from a contestant named Seungja on the popular dating show I Am Solo, there is a significant sentiment that suggesting Dutch pay, especially in a romantic context, is a massive turn-off. We are hearing outright declarations like, if you suggest Dutch pay even when times are tough, I just can't date you. Or, if you say, I bought this, so you buy that, my affection just plummets. The underlying idea here is that dating is supposed to be this inherently romantic, almost luxurious endeavor. If a man is not willing to financially indulge in it, he is signaling a profound lack of genuine interest. This perspective paints dating as an act requiring significant financial means, with the clear implication that men should bear this cost. Now, here is where it gets incredibly complex and, frankly, a bit contradictory. These same women, who often champion the principle of half-half equality in broader societal discussions and professional settings, they apparently find it stingy or petty. The Korean term is jahida when it comes to paying for dates. The expectation seems to be that men should proactively pay to show their interest and affection. But then, the narrative takes a sharp turn when we look at interactions between women. Reports suggest that in same-sex situations, the attitude can differ significantly. There are stories of women expecting older female friends or acquaintances to pay, invoking an unspoken national rule or common practice based on age or seniority. Conversely, some women also express a preference for Dutch pay, citing its cleanliness and convenience, especially when treating someone feels like a financial burden. We also see comments like, if nobody offers to treat, it is Dutch pay, are you a beggar? These comments, often directed at the expectation of being treated, highlight a different, perhaps more pragmatic angle. The core accusation that surfaces repeatedly is that this demand for equality is highly selective, applied differently depending on who you are interacting with, men versus women. So, what is really going on beneath the surface? Why would they actually demand this? Well, the text points towards the intense, almost ruthless capitalist market dynamics that permeate modern society, and South Korea is a prime example. It frames this not just as a simple cultural norm, but as a strategic, almost aggressive negotiation for one's share of the financial pie. When we talk about Korean women's being, as the text puts it, it is viewed through this lens of maximizing personal gain and social capital in a hyper-competitive environment. Think of it like a high-stakes game where every interaction is assessed for its return on investment. In romantic contexts with men, the expectation of being paid for is presented as a crucial test, a way to gauge a man's genuine interest, his perceived value, like checking his credit score for relationship potential and his ability to provide. It is a calculated move to secure a desirable outcome in a landscape where everything feels commodified, from relationships to social status. When it comes to interactions between women, the motivations might shift, perhaps to maintain a certain social image, to engage in peer-to-peer negotiation within their own social circles, or to uphold specific unwritten social hierarchies. But the underlying current, according to this analysis, is still framed as self-interest rather than pure altruism or unadulterated feminist solidarity. It is all about optimizing personal advantage in every social transaction, turning relationships into a form of economic warfare. This is where the cultural context really starts to twist the narrative. So, if everything is a negotiation and everyone is fighting for their slice of the pie, how does that play out specifically within South Korean society? What is the social, cultural, or human dynamic that creates this particular phenomenon? This is where the real cultural irony kicks in, and it is fascinating. South Korea has undergone explosive economic development. It is a place where competition is incredibly fierce and financial success is highly valued, almost worshipped. Yet, it still grapples with lingering traditional gender role expectations. Modern feminism, which advocates for equality across the board, absolutely intersects with a deeply ingrained cultural narrative where men have historically been the primary providers, the breadwinners. The result is a peculiar balancing act. Women might champion feminist ideals of equality in public discourse or in their professional lives. But when it comes to the practical, everyday world of dating and relationships, traditional expectations about men covering costs often resurface with surprising force. It is like wanting to have your cake and eat it too, simultaneously embracing modern ideals and clinging to old comforts. The concept of siyum, that casual dating phase before commitment, still carries the heavy expectation that the man should be the one to pay. This creates a social environment where simple financial transactions become loaded with immense symbolic meaning, leading to what is described as gesoom, which is essentially a subtle power struggle or negotiation over status and expectations. And in this arena, being perceived as jakida or stingy is a major social faux pas, a career-ending move for a potential suitor, especially for men in this context. And this is where it gets genuinely disturbing. So, what happens when this system, with all its inherent contradictions and selective principles, actually gets put into practice? When the demands are met, what is the fallout? This is where the hypocrisy really starts to shine and the cold logic of capitalism inevitably begins to bite back, exposing the fragility of these self-serving expectations. The proclaimed value of equality, which, let us be honest, is a cornerstone of any modern feminist ideology, turns out to be a rather flexible tool, not a rigid, unwavering doctrine. When interacting with men in a romantic setting, that half-half principle, poof, it disappears as if it never existed. The expectation, almost a demand, is that the man pays. But then, when women interact with other women, especially those who are older or hold a certain social standing, the stance can shift dramatically, like a chameleon changing colors. Some women might embrace Dutch pay, yes, citing its cleanliness and practicality, a perfectly rational economic choice, no doubt. But then you have other instances where expectations of being treated by older female friends or acquaintances persist. They invoke those same old traditional norms of hierarchy and generosity that they conveniently overlook when dealing with men. The text even poses a rather pointed question: is taking money from men good kimchi neo behavior, while taking money from women is bad kimchi neo behavior? It is a complete paradox, a logical contortion that defies reason. The system simply does not work because it is not built on consistent ethical grounds. It is built on opportunistic self-interest, leading to widespread confusion, simmering resentment, and frankly, a lot of deeply awkward social interactions. When everyone else went silent, what emerged was this pattern of transactional interactions, and the selective application of principles seems to be setting a trajectory. If this continues, what does the future of relationships in South Korea really look like? If this pattern of transactional interactions and selective application of principles continues, the future looks less like a passionate romance novel and more like a meticulously negotiated business merger. Relationships are going to become even more like rigidly defined contracts than spontaneous unions of affection and genuine connection. Imagine a future where dating apps feature detailed built-in cost-sharing algorithms, or where prenuptial agreements are discussed and finalized before the very first CM date even takes place. The very idea of romantic generosity or spontaneous gestures of affection. It is likely to fade entirely, replaced by strict, almost corporate-level financial accounting for every single social interaction. Romance, which the source text itself calls a luxury, will be ruthlessly reduced to a mere budget line item, managed with spreadsheets and corporate-level precision. The Korean women's being, as depicted in this analysis, will continue its aggressive negotiation in the marketplace of relationships, which will inevitably lead to greater social isolation and fewer authentic bonds. And why? Because the foundation is not being built on genuine connection, mutual respect, or shared values. It is being built on a precarious house of cards destined to collapse. It is a masterclass in maintaining personal advantage by externalizing blame and conveniently ignoring one's own internal contradictions, all while perhaps believing they are acting out of principle or necessity. It is the ultimate irony, demanding romantic ideals and traditional provision in a world that has become so hyper-capitalist, it has managed to turn even love into just another cold, calculated transaction. Fuel the truth at Dating in Korea, support the structure, stay safe in the lounge.